It is a day of recovery and cleanup across a swath of Florida. This is the scene in Wellington, just west of Palm Beach, where a hurricane, of course, tore through that village. Palm Beach Fire and Rescue said that they took 5 people to hospital, 3 of them to a trauma center. They also treated many on the scene. Nearly 20 tornadoes touched down in Florida as a result of Milton, killing several people. More than 3 million households and businesses are waiting for power to be restored. Charles Belay is a former anchor and reporter with more than 30 years of experience covering storms in Florida, and he is in Tampa. Charles, it's great to reconnect with you and to see you're smiling, you're doing okay. How are you, Charles?
Lynn, and I first want to apologize for how I look. I've been busting my butt since 7 a.m. this morning cleaning up after Milton, who was a bad boy. We don't like him. So to answer your question, the past 24 hours for residents has been hell. Pardon my French.
No, that's perfectly fine, Charles, on a day like today. So tell us about what last night was like. What did you hear? What was the experience like?
Well, let me just answer you directly that first question. What was it like? What did I hear? That is one of the most frightening things about a hurricane. You hear sorts of sounds that your brain cannot identify. You know, it's going through the, your Rolodex going, what is that? What is that? And when you don't know what the sound is, it's terrifying because you don't know if something's come through your roof, if part of your walls are ripped away, if that's some sort of flooding, if a wall is cracking, or if something has hit something on the outside of your house. I mean, or electrical problems. That's the other thing. And we've got the electric company right over my shoulder here already trying to get people connected. Hundreds of thousands are without power in Florida on a warm day after, a horrible hurricane, and we got to clean all this up. So It hasn't been fun.
Well, that's encouraging that the electrical company is there trying to get you restored, Charles. Give us a little look around at what you're dealing with today.
Okay, I can't move too much because I'm on internet, so I don't want to. But if you guys look through there, those are electric trucks. They're trying to lift actual wires off the road. You can see the cars as they pass. You can see, and I'm going to follow them, all of the debris that is left on the side of the road. And watch past that blue car. And now here's another gray one. Watch, just look at that just beyond it. Look at the size of that oak tree that has split in two and fallen over. They've already cut half of it out of the street. They got to come and get the other half because it's laying on electric lines that really provide electricity for, didn't mean to touch that button on the side of my phone. Provides electricity. Provides electricity for about 150 people on that grid that way. So it's not been good.
Well, talking about down power lines there, Charles, that it makes sense that officials are saying stay where you are if you can, and let us get things cleaned up and safe again before people are out and about.
Very good point. And that I'm glad that you brought that up because the mayor herself said, look, we know you've evacuated. You want to get home. You want to check on your property. You're frightened. But let us get the roads clear because there's branches down, power lines down, all sorts of debris in the road. If you start running over this stuff, you get stuck and then you cause traffic jams. And we've seen that. But for the most part, it's been pretty cool on this side of the bay in Tampa. You want to talk, it's the tale of two cities, really, Jacqueline, because County, that is where the bomb was dropped. It's awful over there. And you have been showing it all day. The roof ripped off of Tropicana Field where the Tampa Bay Rays play, that will become the iconic image of Milton.
Lee Waldman is a reporter with CNN, and she is in Sarasota, not far from where Milton made landfall last night. So, Lee, tell us about what kind of damage you're seeing where you are.
Yeah, let me show you some of that damage here. You can see some pretty big debris piles. We're in front of a church right here, but what was most shocking to us was this massive tree that was taken down by Hurricane Milton. You can see a pretty big root structure of this tree. When we pulled up about an hour ago, this tree was laying on top of this church, and crews had been hard at work all morning long trying to break apart that tree so they could get it off of that church. And the pastor is here. He says he keeps looking and seeing more and more damage done to his church. His home had some shingles falling off it. He's having to put a tarp over his own roof. We're driving through the neighborhood that's right near this church. We saw a downed power line blocking off one of the roads. It's just a lot of damage, a lot of debris lining the streets here in Sarasota. About a mile from where we are up the road, a sign of hope, though, a staging area for linemen, hundreds and hundreds of utility workers who are going to be deployed out to try and get the power back on. There's 3.2 million customers who've been left in the dark from Hurricane Milton. So that's a sign of hope for people who don't have any power today.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to hear that they are going to be heading out and trying to restore things as fast as possible, Lee. We know that just about the entire state of Florida was affected by Milton. What is your sense of how other parts of the area are dealing with this aftermath?
I think right now the biggest thing is trying to help people who are in need. At this point, we know that over 100 people, 18 animals have had to be rescued in some capacity. We know that there's thousands of Florida National Guard who have been deployed by the governor to provide aid to people in need. Hundreds of shelters have been opened up to help more than 80,000 Floridians who need a place to go, maybe if their home was destroyed or if they fled their homes, if they were in a mandatory evacuation area. So it's a lot of damage and a lot of people who are impacted by a very, very large storm.
Lee, really appreciate your reporting for us. That is CNN reporter Lee Waldman in Sarasota.
We avoided that worst case scenario that we were planning for. But the fact that they prepared for the worst really made sure that they were able to respond to the impacts that they have experienced.
State and local authorities say good planning helped to minimize the number of deaths as well as the damage. And it has also allowed emergency personnel to be directed to the areas most in need. That includes police who say they will patrol the storm zone to ensure thieves don't profit from the disaster. Rescue teams were busy overnight and have been throughout the day today, taking people to safety if they need it. CBC's Sarah Galashan is looking at that part of this, and she joins us now with the latest. So, Sarah, take us through the rescues that you've been seeing.
Oh, some pretty remarkable ones, Jacqueline. A lot of stories and visuals are coming to us across the wires from these areas that were hardest hit. And when we were talking about areas that might be hardest hit, the real concern, we always kept hearing about storm surge. But in fact, we are hearing now from a number of counties is that it was extremely heavy rainfall that is actually responsible for some very significant flooding that we have seen in some of these counties. Pinellas County in Florida reporting 17 inches of rain, which is not how we usually calculate it in Canada, but that's the number they're putting out there in some areas due to rainfall. And they're saying that they are seeing flooding of entire first floors of apartment buildings and people having to be rescued from them. One of the more remarkable stories we have seen, and we have pictures to show you of it, is a 14-year-old boy who was reported to be found clinging to a broken fence in floodwaters, and emergency personnel, first responders in boats, and we have seen a lot of these pictures of first responders in boats, basically plucking him from that floodwater. We don't know for how long he had been in it, but it is, as I say, one of those sort of remarkable stories of rescue that are coming from this area. Also, what we're hearing in Hillsborough County from the sheriff's office there, that they have used 3 amphibious vehicles that can travel both on dry land but also into water in order to be able to access certain areas, individuals, and locations that have been not sort of surprisingly affected by the flooding. And in some cases, these were elderly and disabled individuals who were moved into facilities and even hotels so that they would be safer and away from what they assumed would be risk of flooding and the hurricane. But in fact, they had to, in order to access 138 of these individuals, use these vehicles to get in with water and medical supplies. And in the case of a hotel, a Holiday Inn that saw waters just rush in, they had to remove the elderly people who had been brought to that hotel to be safer and move them to higher areas. Also, further inland, Polk County, an area known as Lakeland, they had some very significant flooding as well. And there's a story of a mom who, with her 4 children in her home, thought they were going to be safe. And then suddenly the water started rushing in. And among her fears, not just that the water was going to come up around them, but she was watching major appliances suddenly start floating around the kitchen. I want to play you how she described what happened.
It caught up the window and it started coming in the house from the window, and the refrigerator started floating. I turned out the power. Me and my children hopped on the oven. And once we hopped on the oven, I called my mom and told my mom, I think me and my children are about to drown to death.
So she was obviously very afraid. They were fine. They were able to get out, her and her 4 children. And in fact, they were able to get help because a passing news crew could see what was going on and recognize that they were in distress. And that was how help eventually got to them. We have not at this point heard of any Canadians who have found themselves either in distress or reached out to the Canadian government for help, but we have calls to ensure that that isn't the case. And now, of course, as we move in through this day after Milton, down in the area of Florida and all these areas that are hard hit, Jacqueline, these rescues, they're being completed for the most part. We understand that they are likely to be wrapping up. And then the big work really is going to start to take place, and that's the cleanup. And you've been talking about that all hour, showing those pictures, and that's clearly going to be a big job.
Oh, absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for the latest on this. That's CBC's Sarah Galashan.